Without being particularly showy, the previous Swift was generally pleasing to look at. Much like everything else about it, the bodywork was a straightforward affair, but some shrewd, sharp lines and a sense of neatness kept it from seeming too upright and anonymous. The new version does enough heavy lifting to make the nameplate's transition recognizable, although perhaps not enough to prevent a little anonymity from creeping into the softer, more rounded profile. Any trade-off in chic has been compensated in the model's unseen belt tightening, though. Suzuki claims the latest Swift is more than 100 kilograms lighter in its starter guise. Some 30 kilograms of that has been lost in the switch to the cleverer, stiffer Hardtech platform, despite the car being 40 mm wider and 20 mm longer in the wheelbase than its predecessor. Even the all-wheel drive version, with the presumably heftier 4-cylinder petrol engine, is claimed to weigh less than 1 ton. That unit, the naturally aspirated 89 bhp 1.2-liter dual-jet, is a carryover from the previous Swift, ditto the optional 4-wheel drive system, which uses a viscous coupling to deploy torque to the back axle in the event of wheel spin at the front. The 109 bhp turbocharged 1.0-liter booster jet engine drives the front axle via a standard 5-speed manual gearbox or an optional 6-speed automatic. Alongside either engine, the Swift can now be had with SHVS, Smart Hybrid Vehicle by Suzuki, a very mild form of petrol-electric hybrid that uses an integrated starter generator to gently assist the combustion engine during acceleration and improve start-stop performance. Its fitment comes with a 6.2 kg weight penalty because of the addition of a 12-volt lithium-ion battery under the driver's seat, but its 37 pounds-foot of electric motor-supplied torque helps to reduce CO2 emissions by 7 grams/km, making the Swift a sub-100 grams/km prospect in this format. The system, which is recharged during braking, provides a whiff of technical sophistication to what is otherwise an orthodox modern supermini. The suspension is by way of McPherson struts at the front and a rear twist beam, and the variable ratio steering is electrically powered. Various chassis components have been hollowed out or otherwise lightened in the pursuit of an admirably svelte curb weight, but otherwise the new Swift remains a considered, credit-worthy update of the old. Suzuki's unwillingness to stray far from its established conventions is well evidenced by elements of the new cabin. Although the design has been overhauled, there is little in the material quality to suggest that the manufacturer has sought to move the bargain basement status of its supermini further north in buyer perception. Brass tacks, this means there's a lot of hollow, shiny black plastic, a little too much of it on prominent display. Elsewhere, Suzuki has attempted to get marginally funkier with the climate controls and vent placement, although, much like the exterior, you'd be forgiven for missing the cleaner appearance of its predecessor. Fit and finish are about on a par with the outgoing Swifts, so the new model is acceptable without ever threatening to overhaul the South Korean opposition, let alone those from Europe. However, the driving position is decent, augmented by a 20 mm drop in the hip point of those up front, as well as redesigned and slightly more pliant seats. Those in the back sit lower now, too, and thanks to the longer wheelbase and some real estate liberated from the engine compartment, there's marginally more legroom on offer. It isn't of class-leading proportions, but the packaging and the relative generosity of the roofline mean that 2 regular-sized adults fit without much fuss. Of likely greater consequence to most buyers is the 25% of additional boot space, a 54-liter gain that lands it significantly closer to the standard sizing of 5-door rivals such as the Cosset and Volkswagen Polo. Suzuki's glass-fronted multimedia system, with a 7.0-inch touchscreen, is less new than the car around it, but it will seem revolutionary enough to anyone laboring with the previous Swift's much older, clunkier unit. The polished fascia doesn't necessarily blend in with the surrounding plastic trim, yet it makes for one of the car's few nice surfaces to slide your fingers across. Obviously, that's helpful in a touchscreen, especially one that isn't always deeply intuitive. Nevertheless, The range-topping SZ5 trim of our test car adds additional speakers, a DAB tuner and Bluetooth streaming are standard across the entire Swift range, and a satellite navigation system, which is fine except for the fact that it insists on disengaging the address keypad while you're in motion. That's an aid to safety, no doubt, but it is not much help if you find yourself trying to recall which exit is yours on the outside lane of a motorway. Getting the voice recognition to decipher your pronunciation is certainly no more convenient. The previous Swift was something of a bastion of naturally aspirated petrol engines, its ubiquitous, hard-edged, variable valve peppiness best exemplified by the outgoing sport version. The earnestness suited the sordid Supermini well, but it doesn't take long in the booster jet version to consider its turbocharged, electrically tweaked delivery a worthy upgrade. Principally, this accolade is earned by the caliber of the 1.0-liter triple, which, although less potent and free-spirited than Ford's equivalent, manages to evince some of the same warbling, cherry energy. The modestly forceful whoosh of trilling acceleration yielded at 2,000 revolutions per minute with the arrival of peak twist, though, is Suzuki's own. Any battery-fed assistance is impossible to discern, except perhaps in the unexpected keenness of the progress. We recorded 10.5 seconds to 60 miles per hour from a standing start, commendable for a compact car handicapped by two oversized occupants. In-gear acceleration would have been equally satisfying were it not for the mild physical hindrance of the baggy and slightly unyielding 5-speed manual gearbox. The motor deserves the kind of short-throw, lightly fettled palm-pleaser that Volkswagen twins with practically every small petrol engine, but instead it gets the unwieldiness of a transmission that is unkeen to indulge you with seamless or even accurate upshifts. This makes gear changes merely serviceable, which is a shame when the booster jet makes a point of reaching peak output with just enough progressive verve to keep you interested in occasionally finding 5,500 revolutions per minute. Typically, of course, with progress subsidized low down, you won't need to, an attribute that is of predictable benefit to the Swift's fuel economy. Even with virtually non-stop spiritedness, our test car returned an average of 45.7 miles per gallon during its time with us. That's well short of the 65.7 miles per gallon combined claim, but a 56.8 miles per gallon touring result shows just how economical the flyweight Suzuki is likely to be if you seek to indulge it. The Swift is just a little bit guilty of pouring cold water on moderately high expectations where this section is concerned. As a volume-selling supermini, and we must remember that although the outgoing version always looked after the interests of keener drivers better than it had any right to at the price, a volume-selling supermini is what the Swift is. It's a dynamically competent and reasonably well-rounded effort. But the naturally athletic, effortlessly agile and involving feel of the previous car is notable by its absence. Slightly overly light, elastic-feeling steering is your first indication that all might not be well with the Swift's driving experience, which, after the limp gear shift we've already mentioned, brings the underwhelming but more closely related Baleno to mind much more readily than the previous Swift. Around town, the obliging lightness of the Swift's wheel makes junctions and car parks easy to negotiate, but at B-road and motorway pace, the rack is notably short of on-center feel and relative high-speed stability, and it has a tendency to wander slightly if you are not always concentrating on your lane position. At a basic level, the Swift can certainly cope with being driven keenly. Its grip level is fairly strong, its directional response smart, its handling balance respectable and its body control decent. But on those four respects, the new Swift is a lot closer to the dynamic standards of the average supermini than the previous one was. At times, the car strays towards a feeling of stodginess in its cornering manners and begins to heel over just a little bit too hard on its outside wheels to convince you that it's truly game for a giggle. Its ride, meanwhile, is more busy, hollow and resonant than that of its more mature-feeling European-built rivals, and it doesn't handle sharper ridges and bumps as well. Those are the kinds of compromises you might willingly accept for a keen, precise and engaging drive, of course, But when they come without the same payoff in a car that's plainly trying but struggling to seem like a more rounded prospect than it used to be, they're much more conspicuous. The Swift does a willing enough job of replicating the zesty character of its predecessor, but it quickly begins to fray when you drive it hard. The car's grip level is high enough to put questions about basic stability and security well out of the picture, but it's ultimately undermined by gathering body roll that gradually levers enough front tire contact patch off the tarmac to create understeer. Initial directional response and cornering balance aren't of the sort you'd need to tease any handling adjustability out of the car, either. Suzuki's electronic stability control remains in the background until it's genuinely needed. It works well to keep tabs on throttle on understeer mid-corner, and you can turn it off as and when you want to.